The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of the Hotel Plaza Athene as Meghan stood before her reflection, barely recognizing the woman staring back. 3 months had passed since she received that life-changing phone call from Caroline, the fashion director who would become her guide into this glittering world. Now here she was, about to step into Paris Fashion Week as more than just a spectator. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the coffee cup on the marble vanity. The steam rose like incense, carrying with it the weight of anticipation and fear. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl, flipping through her grandmother's old Vogue magazines in the dusty attic of their suburban home. Back then, Paris seemed as distant as the moon, a place where impossibly beautiful people lived impossibly beautiful lives. The phone buzzed against the cool surface, startling her from her reverie. Caroline's voice crackled through the speaker with characteristic urgency. "Darling, the car will be there in 20 minutes. Are you ready for Chanel?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Was anyone ever truly ready for Chanel? Meghan thought of the pristine white invitation that had arrived by courier just weeks ago, embossed with the interlocking C's that represented everything she had ever aspired to touch. She moved to the window, pressing her palm against the glass as she watched the city wake up below. Parisians hurried along the cobblestone streets with that effortless grace she had always envied. They made everything look so easy, so natural. She wondered if she would ever possess that same confidence, that ability to belong in spaces that had once seemed reserved for other people. The reflection in the window showed a woman transformed, gone were the simple dresses and comfortable flats of her old life. In their place stood someone wearing a carefully chosen ensemble that had taken hours to select. The black wool dress hugged her curves in all the right places, while the statement necklace caught the light like captured stars. But beneath the surface, she was still that uncertain girl who had once practiced walking in her mother's heels, dreaming of runways she might never see. Her phone lit up with messages from friends back home. Sarah had sent a photo of the local newspaper featuring a small article about Meghan's Paris debut. The headline read, "Local woman makes it big in fashion capital," and seeing those words in print made everything feel suddenly real and terrifyingly permanent. There was no going back now. Success or failure. This week would define her future in ways she was only beginning to understand. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The late nights spent sketching designs by lamplight in her tiny apartment. The rejection letters that had papered her bedroom wall like a monument to persistence. The day she had finally saved enough money for that first trip to New York, clutching her portfolio like a lifeline as she navigated the intimidating world of fashion houses and modeling agencies. The breakthrough had come unexpectedly, as breakthroughs often do. A chance encounter at a coffee shop in Soho, where Caroline had noticed her unique sense of style and struck up a conversation that would change everything. 6 months of careful cultivation followed, with Caroline introducing her to the right people, teaching her the unspoken rules of an industry that thrived on exclusivity and insider knowledge. Now, as she applied the final touches of lipstick in a shade called Paris Red, Meghan felt the weight of representation on her shoulders. She wasn't just representing herself today. She carried the hopes and dreams of everyone who had ever felt like an outsider looking in. The small-town girls who stayed up late watching fashion documentaries. The dreamers who sketched dresses in the margins of their notebooks. The believers who refused to let geography or circumstance define their limits. The knock on her door came precisely on time. Through the peephole, she could see the uniformed driver waiting patiently in the hallway. This was it. No more rehearsals, no more practice runs. Today, she would walk into the epicenter of the fashion world and claim her place among the elite who had been born into this rarefied air. As she gathered her purse and jacket, Meghan caught one last glimpse of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was ready. Not perfect, not without fear, but ready nonetheless. She had earned this moment through years of dedication, sacrifice, and unwavering belief in herself when others had doubted. The elevator descended smoothly toward the lobby, carrying her toward whatever awaited outside. Through the glass doors, she could see the black car idling at the curb, its engine purring with quiet power. Beyond that lay the streets of Paris, the fashion houses, and the future she had been building one careful step at a time. The Chanel atelier on Rue Cambon hummed with controlled chaos as Meghan stepped through its legendary doors for the first time. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and everywhere she looked, there were reminders of Coco Chanel's revolutionary spirit. Models glided past in various states of preparation, their faces masks of professional calm despite the whirlwind surrounding them. Caroline appeared at her elbow as if summoned by magic, her practiced eye already assessing the scene. "The energy is different this season," she murmured, guiding Meghan through the maze of assistants, photographers, and fashion editors who seemed to move with choreographed precision. "There's something electric in the air, don't you feel it?" Meghan did feel it. It was like standing in the eye of a beautiful storm, where creativity and commerce collided in spectacular fashion. She watched as seamstresses made last-minute adjustments to garments that would be seen by millions around the world within hours. Every stitch mattered. Every detail would be scrutinized by critics who had the power to make or break careers with a single review. The first shock came when she was introduced to Isabel, the show's creative director, who greeted her with air kisses and rapid-fire French that Caroline translated with impressive speed. "She says you have interesting bone structure," Caroline whispered, "and that Gabrielle would have appreciated your spirit." To be compared to Coco, Chanel herself, even indirectly, sent shivers down Meghan's spine. As they moved deeper into the atelier, Meghan caught glimpses of the collection that would soon grace the runway. Each piece told a story of timeless elegance reimagined for the modern woman. There were tweed jackets with unexpected cutouts, classic suits in bold new proportions, and accessories that managed to be both revolutionary and reverential to the house's heritage. The moment that would later become the centerpiece of her interviews happened almost by accident. She was standing near a rack of completed looks when one of the models called in sick at the last minute. Panic rippled through the team as they realized they needed someone who could fit into a particularly crucial ensemble, a stunning black ensemble that was meant to close the show's first act. "What's your size?" Isabel asked Meghan directly, her eyes calculating measurements with the precision of someone who had dressed thousands of women over the decades. Before Meghan could fully process what was happening, she found herself being ushered into a fitting room where hands pulled and tucked and pinned until she was transformed into something that looked like it belonged on the pages of Vogue. Standing before the mirror in that moment, wearing clothes that cost more than most people's yearly salary, Meghan felt the shift happen inside her. This wasn't about playing dress-up anymore. This was about understanding that fashion could be a form of armor, a way to present yourself to the world that communicated confidence and intention without saying a word. The hours that followed blurred together in a symphony of preparation. Hair and makeup artists worked their magic while Meghan listened to the stories flowing around her. She learned about the model who had been discovered in a small village in Eastern Europe and was now one of the most sought-after faces in fashion. She heard whispers about the celebrity sitting front row who was rumored to be wearing borrowed jewelry worth more than a small country's GDP. But it was the conversation with Marie, a veteran seamstress who had worked for the house for over 30 years, that stayed with her longest. Marie spoke about the responsibility that came with wearing Chanel, about how every woman who put on one of their pieces became an ambassador for a certain kind of fearless femininity. Coco, she believed that fashion should serve the woman, not the other way around. Marie explained in accented English, her weathered hands still steady as she made microscopic adjustments to Meghan's outfit. "When you wear this, you carry that philosophy with you. You become part of something bigger than yourself." The reality of what she was about to do hit Meghan as the first guests began arriving for the show. Through the windows, she could see the fashion elite taking their seats in the front row. Anna Wintour's distinctive bob caught the light as photographers captured her entrance. Celebrities whose faces graced magazine covers worldwide chatted casually with designers whose names were synonymous with luxury. Then came the moment she hadn't expected at all. Isabel approached with a proposal that would change everything about Meghan's Paris experience. They wanted her to walk in the show, not as a professional model, but as herself, representing the new generation of women who were redefining what it meant to belong in these exclusive spaces. The offer hung in the air like a challenge and an opportunity wrapped together. Meghan could feel her heart racing as she considered what this meant. Walking in a Chanel show wasn't just about putting one foot in front of the other. It was about claiming space in a world that had historically been reserved for a very specific type of person. As she nodded her acceptance, Meghan thought about all the women who had come before her, who had fought for the right to be taken seriously in industries that had tried to diminish them. She thought about Coco Chanel herself, who had revolutionized fashion by refusing to accept that women should be uncomfortable in the name of beauty. The final moments before the show began felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that the jump would either result in flight or a spectacular fall. Either way, there was no turning back now. The music began to pulse through the walls, and Meghan could hear the excited murmur of the audience as they settled in for a show that would be talked about for seasons to come. The backstage area transformed into organized madness as showtime approached. Models lined up in precise order, each one a study in concentrated focus despite the apparent chaos swirling around them. Meghan found herself positioned between Valentina, a seasoned professional who had walked for every major house, and Chloe, a newcomer whose nervous energy matched her own. "First time at Chanel?" Valentina asked. Her voice warmed despite the intensity of the moment. When Meghan nodded, the model's expression softened. "I remember my first show here. I was so terrified I forgot to breathe for the first half of the runway. But there's something magical about this place that catches you and carries you forward." The makeup artist applied final touches while the hairstylist ensured every strand was perfectly placed. Meghan caught glimpses of herself in the mirrors scattered throughout the space and still couldn't quite believe this was happening. The black Chanel creation she wore felt like a second skin now, the fabric moving with her as if it had been made specifically for this moment. Through the curtain, she could hear the audience settling in for the show. The front row was a who's who of fashion royalty, celebrities, and influential buyers whose decisions would determine which pieces would appear in stores around the world. The weight of their collective gaze felt heavy, even though the curtain still separated them from the models preparing backstage. Caroline appeared beside her, phone in hand, already documenting every moment for the article that would run in next month's issue. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Though her experience, I was already assessing Meghan's readiness. Years of covering fashion weeks had taught her to read the signs of a model who was ready versus one who might stumble under pressure. Terrified and exhilarated, Meghan admitted, surprised by her own honesty. Usually, she was better at projecting confidence even when she felt uncertain. But something about this moment called for truth rather than performance. The music began with a haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. This was the signal everyone had been waiting for. The first model took her position, and Meghan watched as she transformed from a nervous young woman into a fierce embodiment of Chanel's vision. The curtain parted like the Red Sea, revealing the gleaming runway beyond. As models began their procession, Meghan observed the subtle choreography that made each show unique. This wasn't just about walking and turning. Every movement was designed to showcase the clothes while telling a story about the woman who might wear them. The runway became a stage where fabric and flesh combined to create something approaching art. Her turn was approaching faster than she had anticipated. 3 models ahead of her, then 2, then 1. The noise from the audience grew more appreciative with each new look, and she could hear the rapid-fire clicking of cameras capturing every angle, every expression, every perfect imperfection that made high fashion so intoxicating. "Remember," whispered the show coordinator as Meghan moved into position, "you're not just wearing the clothes. You're the clothes. Let them speak through you." The advice echoed in her mind as she stepped through the curtain and onto the runway proper. The lights were brighter than she had expected, washing everything in a golden glow that made the assembled audience appear almost ethereal. For a split second, the magnitude of the moment threatened to overwhelm her, but then training and instinct took over. Her first steps felt cautious, but as she moved down the runway, something shifted inside her. The clothes seemed to guide her movements, and she found herself embodying the confident, sophisticated woman that Coco Chanel had envisioned decades ago. The audience became a blur of faces and camera flashes, but she felt their energy, their appreciation for what she represented in this moment. At the end of the runway, she executed the pause and turn that had been drilled into her during the brief rehearsal. As she pivoted to head back, she caught sight of Anna Wintour in the front row, the legendary editor's expression unreadable behind her signature sunglasses. To her left, a young blogger was frantically typing on her phone, probably already crafting the post that would introduce Meghan to her thousands of followers. The walk back felt different, more confident, as if she had proven to herself that she belonged in this rarefied space. Other models caught her eye and offered subtle nods of approval. In the fashion world, acknowledgement from peers was currency, and she was already accumulating wealth she hadn't known existed. Backstage, the energy reached fever pitch as the show built toward its climax. Models changed quickly into their second looks, while assistants ensured every detail remained perfect despite the organized chaos. Meghan found herself caught up in the rhythm, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Her second walk featured an entirely different ensemble. This one a bold reimagining of the classic Chanel suit in unexpected proportions and textures. The confidence she had gained from her first appearance carried over, and this time she owned the runway from the moment she stepped onto it. The finale was a spectacle of coordinated movement as all the models returned to the runway together, forming a living tableau of Chanel's vision for the modern woman. Standing among these professionals, Meghan felt a sense of belonging that surprised her with its intensity. This wasn't just about wearing beautiful clothes or being photographed by the world's most influential media. This was about being part of a tradition that stretched back through decades of women who had refused to be limited by others' expectations. As Isabel took her final bow to thunderous applause, Meghan realized she had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. She was no longer an observer of the fashion world. She was a participant, a player in a game whose rules she was only beginning to understand, but whose rewards were already becoming clear. The curtain fell, but the real show was just beginning. Now came the part she hadn't anticipated, the aftermath where connections were made, opportunities were born, and futures are decided in conversations that happened between the official events. The after-party at the Ritz was where the real business of Fashion Week took place, though it masqueraded as celebration. Meghan arrived still glowing from her runway debut, the adrenaline of the show slowly giving way to the realization of what she had just accomplished. The hotel's opulent ballroom buzzed with conversations in multiple languages, deals being struck over champagne, and connections being forged that would shape the industry for seasons to come. She had changed into a midnight blue cocktail dress that Caroline had selected specifically for this event. After parties are where careers are made or broken, Caroline had explained while helping her choose accessories. You want to look approachable, but not desperate, confident, but not arrogant. It's a delicate balance. The guest list read like a who's who of fashion royalty. Editors from major publications clustered around high-top tables, their practiced eyes constantly scanning the room for the next big story. Buyers from department stores that could make or break a designer's season moved through the crowd with the confidence of people who knew their power. And scattered throughout were the celebrities whose presence could elevate a brand from respected to iconic with a single Instagram post. Meghan's first real conversation of the evening happened almost by accident. She had been standing near the bar, nursing a glass of champagne and trying to look like she belonged, when a woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached her. "You were magnificent tonight," the woman said, her slight accent placing her somewhere in Scandinavia. "I'm Astrid Larson from Nordic Fashion Council." That was your first Chanel show, wasn't it? The conversation that followed would prove to be a turning point. Astrid was in Paris scouting new talent for an upcoming collaboration between European fashion weeks. She was looking for fresh faces who could represent the next generation of fashion, women who brought authenticity to an industry sometimes criticized for its lack of diversity. "There's something different about you," Astrid explained as they moved to a quieter corner of the room. "You walked that runway like you had every right to be there, but without the arrogance that often comes with success. That's rare in this business." As they talked, Meghan became aware of the subtle observations happening around them. Fashion was a visual industry, and people were constantly reading signals from clothing choices, posture, conversation partners, even the way someone held their champagne glass. Every interaction was being cataloged, analyzed, and filed away for future reference. The evening took an unexpected turn when Philippe Dubois, the creative director of a rising French fashion house, joined their conversation. His reputation preceded him. He was known for discovering models who went on to become household names, and his shows were consistently among the most talked-about events of any fashion week. "I saw you tonight," he said without preamble, his direct approach so different from the careful politeness that characterized most Fashion Week conversations. "You have something that can't be taught. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan had come to Paris hoping to observe and learn, maybe make some connections that could help her future endeavors. She hadn't expected to find herself in conversations about her own potential career in an industry she had always admired from the outside. Philippe's offer came with a gravity that surprised everyone, including himself. His upcoming show needed someone who could embody the spirit of modern femininity without losing touch with classical elegance. "I don't want another cookie-cutter model," he explained. "I want someone who understands that fashion is about more than just clothes. It's about identity, about power, about the stories we tell the world about who we are." The conversation shifted when Marcus Chun, a photographer whose images graced the covers of every major fashion magazine, stopped by their table. His presence immediately changed the dynamic. In fashion, photographers were the alchemists who could transform beautiful clothes and interesting faces into iconic images that live forever. "I'd like to work with you," he said to Meghan, his statement casual but carrying weight that everyone at the table understood. A Marcus Chun photograph could launch careers, establish reputations, and create the kind of portfolio that opened doors throughout the industry. As the evening progressed, Meghan found herself at the center of a constellation of opportunities she hadn't known existed. Each conversation revealed new layers of the fashion world's complexity. There was the journalist from Tokyo who wanted to feature her in an upcoming article about the globalization of fashion. The stylist from Los Angeles who was already envisioning her in editorials that would bridge high fashion and commercial appeal. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during a quiet conversation with Elena Rodriguez, a veteran model who had transitioned into mentoring newcomers. Elena had watched Meghan's debut from the audience and sought her out specifically. 20 years ago, when I started, there were very few women who looked like me on these runways," Elena shared, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "Every time someone new breaks through, it makes it easier for the next person. What you did tonight wasn't just about you. You opened a door that others will walk through." The responsibility implicit in Elena's words was both inspiring and daunting. Meghan hadn't considered that her success might have implications beyond her own career. But as she looked around the room at the diverse group of people who had sought her out throughout the evening, she began to understand that representation mattered in ways she was only beginning to grasp. Near midnight, as the party began to wind down, Caroline found her way back to Meghan's side. "How are you processing all of this?" she asked, her journalistic instincts picking up on the overwhelm that was starting to show despite Meghan's best efforts to maintain composure. "I feel like I've been drinking from a fire hose," Meghan admitted. "This morning I was just hoping to observe and learn. Now I have offers I never dreamed of and responsibilities I hadn't considered." The ride back to the hotel was quiet, both women lost in their own thoughts. Through the windows of the taxi, Paris glittered like a jewel box, its ancient streets hosting the eternal dance between tradition and innovation that made it the perfect home for Fashion Week. As they pulled up to the hotel, Meghan realized that tomorrow would bring an entirely different set of challenges and opportunities. Word of her debut had already begun spreading through social media, and her phone had been buzzing with notifications throughout the evening. The fashion world moved at lightning speed, and she was now part of its momentum. The final morning of Fashion Week arrived with a weight of transformation hanging heavy in the Parisian air. Meghan stood once again before the mirror in her hotel room, but the woman looking back was fundamentally different from the one who had arrived just days before. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from industry contacts, interview requests, and opportunities that would have seemed impossible a week ago. The past 3 days have been a whirlwind of shows, fittings, meetings, and conversations that had reshaped her understanding of both the fashion industry and herself. She had walked for 2 more designers, each experience building her confidence and expanding her network. Her Instagram following had exploded from a few hundred friends to tens of thousands of fashion enthusiasts who had discovered her through street-style photographers and industry insiders. Caroline knocked softly before entering, her arms full of newspapers and magazines featuring coverage of the week's events. "You made quite an impression," she said, spreading the publications across the marble table. There, scattered across multiple pages, were photographs of Meghan from various shows and events. The images captured not just her appearance, but something indefinable that photographers seemed drawn to. "Look at this," Caroline continued, pointing to a particular spread in French Vogue. "They're calling you the face of fashion's future and a breath of fresh authenticity in an industry often criticized for superficiality." The words felt surreal, applied to someone who had been unknown in fashion circles just a week ago. The most significant conversation of her trip was scheduled for that morning. Victoria Ashford, the global creative director for one of fashion's most prestigious houses, had requested a private meeting. Caroline had been tight-lipped about the details, but her excitement was palpable. This could change everything, was all she would say. The meeting took place in Victoria's suite at the George V, a room that overlooked the Champs-Élysées and spoke to the kind of power and influence that shaped global fashion trends. Victoria herself was exactly what Meghan had expected: impeccably dressed, intimidatingly intelligent, and possessed of the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "I've been watching your progress this week," Victoria began, her tone direct but not unkind. "You've managed something that very few people accomplish, especially in their first fashion week. You've maintained authenticity while adapting to an environment that often encourages people to lose themselves." The conversation that followed was unlike any Meghan had experienced during her time in Paris. Victoria spoke about the responsibility that came with influence in fashion, about the power of the industry to shape not just what people wore, but how they saw themselves. She talked about the need for voices that could bridge the gap between high fashion and real life, between aspiration and accessibility. "I'm not offering you a traditional modeling contract," Victoria explained as the meeting drew toward its conclusion. "What I'm proposing is something new, a role that doesn't quite exist yet, but that I believe the industry needs. You would be an ambassador for authentic style, someone who represents our brand while maintaining the genuine quality that drew us to you." The offer was generous beyond anything Meghan could have imagined, but it came with challenges she was only beginning to understand. Success in fashion required more than just looking good in clothes. It demanded consistency, professionalism, and the ability to embody a brand's values while remaining true to yourself. As she walked back to her hotel, Meghan's mind raced with the implications of everything that had happened. A week ago, she had been planning to return home with some great stories and maybe a few business cards. Now she was contemplating relocating to Paris, learning French, and building a career in an industry she had always loved but never imagined she could be part of. The afternoon brought a final surprise in the form of a text from her mother. The local news station back home had picked up the story of her Paris success, and her family was fielding interview requests from reporters who wanted to know more about the small-town woman who had taken Fashion Week by storm. "We always knew you were special," her mother had written, "but seeing you succeed on such a big stage makes us prouder than we can express. Whatever you decide, we support you completely." The support meant everything, but it also highlighted the magnitude of the decision she faced. Accepting Victoria's offer would mean leaving behind the comfortable predictability of her old life for the exciting uncertainty of a fashion career. It meant learning to navigate an industry known for its complexity, its politics, and its ability to build people up or tear them down with equal efficiency. As evening approached, Meghan found herself at a small cafe near her hotel, watching Parisians go about their daily lives with that effortless style she had always admired. Tomorrow she would fly back home, but she would not be the same person who had left. The experiences of the past week had changed her in ways she was still discovering. Her phone buzzed with one final message of the day. It was from Philippe, the French designer who had been so direct at the after-party. "Whatever you decide about your future, remember that you earned your place here. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The message crystallized something that had been forming in her mind throughout the week. She had come to Paris hoping to observe greatness. Instead, she had discovered that greatness wasn't something reserved for other people. It was something that could be cultivated, earned, and claimed by anyone willing to work for it. As she packed her bags that night, Meghan carefully folded the dress she had worn for her Chanel debut. The garment had been returned to her as a gift from the house, a token of what Isabel had called a very special partnership. But more than a beautiful piece of clothing, it represented proof of how much could change in just a few days when opportunity met preparation and courage. The reflection in her hotel room mirror showed a woman who had discovered her own power. Tomorrow would bring decisions about her future, but tonight she was content to savor the satisfaction of a dream realized and a journey just beginning. Paris had given her many gifts during Fashion Week, but perhaps the greatest was the knowledge that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined.